Hi, folks. Welcome and thank you for joining us today. I am TJ Newman, author of Falling and the upcoming novel Drowning, which comes out at the end of May. But the only thing about me that's of interest today is that I am the lucky person that gets to participate in this conversation with a man who needs no introduction. And frankly, I'm not going to give him much of one because I've got a lot of questions to ask. You guys have a lot of questions to ask. And we're all here to listen to him talk, not me. This man is the New York Times bestselling author of over 25 novels. He has won many, many, many awards, the Silver Dagger, the LA Times Book Prize, Raymond Chandler Award. He's the son of a sailor and a librarian. He's a former safari guide and private investigator, a man I am privileged to call my mentor and honored to call my friend. Ladies and gentlemen, Don Winslow.
Oh, thank you, TJ. That's so nice. And I'm honored to be here. And thank you so much for hosting it, and by the way, I've had a chance to read Drowning. I'm one of the lucky ones. And it's fantastic. And I can't wait for it to come out. So everyone go out and buy it. Although, TJ, I have to get on a plane later today. So thanks a lot.
Sorry about that. But Don, congratulations and happy pub day. Today is publication day.
It is. Hello, hello.
How are you feeling?
Good. It's fun. It's exciting. You know how this goes. I mean, you sit with a book alone in a room for years, and it just looks like words on a screen, and then it becomes this, and hopefully people read it. So it's an exciting day.
Absolutely. And you said you sit, with words on a screen for, alone in a room for a while. And for this book and this trilogy in particular, that was quite a period of time that you sat alone with this book and with these characters and with these words. The book just came out today, so we'll go light on spoilers and just have this big conversation. Since most people haven't had the opportunity to read it just yet, but in case people don't know or are confused, City of Fire, the first in the trilogy, came out a year ago.
Right.
The Ashes, which is the conclusion, will come out a year from now. And today we're talking about City of Dreams, the book that came out that and all three of these books, this trilogy, they incorporate elements of Greek tragic dramas in a world of contemporary crime. And you sort of put out a tweet a few days ago that was sort of a great elevator pitch that I thought was fantastic about City of Dreams. So I'm just going to read you your tweet. An East Coast crime war has Danny Ryan on the run from the mafia and the FBI. He lands in California to start life over, but a beautiful movie star with a dark past pulls him right back in.
Mm-hmm.
That's the context of what we're talking about. And what I was alluding to when I said you've been with this for quite some time. You have been working on this trilogy for 28 years.
Yeah, amazing, huh?
It really is. What was the initial inspiration?
Sort of later in life, in my late 30s, I started to read the classics, the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Greek tragic dramas, the Aeneid. And TJ, that it struck me, I already know these stories. These are things I grew up with. I grew up in New England during the era of the New England mob wars, and it felt like the Iliad. And some of the plots of these Greek tragic dramas reminded me so much of not only real life crime, but our beloved crime genre, of noir fiction. And so I had this idea, could I take these characters and stories and themes from antiquity, but make them a fully modern crime novel, a trilogy, a saga that you could read with no reference to the classics whatsoever, if you chose to, or if you had some nodding acquaintance, you might approach it from that level. So that was the impetus.
Interesting. And why now? You've been working on this for nearly 3 decades. What about now was the right time to do that? Because it's not like you were, inactive for 28 years. You've
Right.
been writing other stories. So why did you wait to put these out? And why is now the right time to finally tell this story?
A number of things, yeah, as you alluded to, I was writing a few other books, a big drug trilogy and a couple of other things during this time. I think for a long time, I wasn't sure that I had the talent to write this trilogy, that I yet had the skills, had developed as a writer, where I could take these great works and translate them effectively into modern crime. And then also, to be perfectly honest with you, I felt this was going to be the culmination of my career. That if I could do this and add that to a body of work since 1991, now was the time to do it. And the other thing is, about 7 or 8 years ago, my wife Jean and I started to go back to Rhode Island, where I'm from and where the first book is set, where I left when I was 17 years old to wander the world. We went back to basically to help take care of my mom as she aged. And as I spent more and more time in Rhode Island, I fell in love with it again. And you know how it happens when you fall in love with a location, you want to write about it. So I think that's the answer to why now.
It's fascinating. And it's also interesting as a writer, and I'm sure there's a lot of other writers who are listening to us now, to hear someone like you with as prolific a career as you have to say something like, I wasn't sure I could do it. It speaks to the way that, as I said at the top, you are a mentor of mine, and I know you mentor so many other people and you champion so many other authors. It's really something to hear someone of your talent and accomplishment say something like that.
Well, it was the truth. I'd write a few chapters and then I'd hit a wall and set it down, and then maybe a year or so later, a few months later, I'd have a little time and I'd pick it back up and maybe fix some of those things that went wrong, but then hit another wall, and finally I felt like, yeah, I think I have command of this, enough to write the books.
And so over that 28-year period, how did the trilogy evolve?
It was always in my head. It was always going to be a trilogy in my mind, unlike the drug trilogy, which was accidental. I quit after every volume of that drug trilogy and said I wouldn't do another one.
Appropriate for a drug trilogy.
There you go. But with this one, I always knew, because Danny Ryan, the protagonist, and Aeneas, his classical antecedent, their lives fell into 3 very distinct phases. So I always saw this as a trilogy. The issue and the stumbling blocks were finding the modern equivalents to those ancient events that made sense and that were very human and very contemporary. And so it took time to figure those things out, and then when I'd figure one thing out, then I'd go ahead and write that segment. Some of the segments in this book, the second book, were written back in the 90s. Others were written, a few months ago. So, it was a matter of developing it and coming up with the ideas and living with them long enough that they became real.
And I also think that speaks to, if you can have an idea for a story, if you can have something that you're working on and you can set it down and pick it up over the course of nearly 3 decades, and stuff from the beginning still rings true at the end, there's that smacks of timelessness. That smacks really of a story that digs at something deeper. And I think that really comes across in this story, that it feels wholly contemporary, yet also at the same time timeless.
Thank you. But those are timeless themes. I mean, there's a reason that these classics have lasted for 2,000 years. And there's a reason, I think that when we as crime writers, and that's what I am, I'm a crime fiction writer. That's my genre. I live in that tent, and very happily so. But I think sometimes we don't search deeply enough for our roots. You know, we will look back to Raymond Chandler and Agatha Christie and maybe A. Conan Doyle, but we also should be looking at Dickens, and we should be looking at Shakespeare and Cervantes, and yes, Homer and Virgil, because they were writing those great themes of honor and dishonor, loyalty, love, revenge, you know, passion. And those things, they live over the centuries.
Yeah. That's very true. You brought up Danny Ryan, the hero of this trilogy, an incredible character, just beautifully fleshed out in the way that you have over these two books. Haven't gotten the pleasure of reading the third, but over these two books, he's just wonderful. And for those of us that haven't heard the news, the film rights to City of Dreams has been optioned by Sony. It is going to be made into a movie. The trilogy will be, and Danny Ryan, this remarkable character, has already been cast
Yes.
by, Oscar nominated actor Austin Butler, just coming off of his turn as his unbelievable performance as Elvis in the movie Elvis. What can you tell us? Everyone's sort of like, what can you tell us about the Sony adaptation? What can you tell us about Austin and about that conversation?
Yeah. Well, listen, I had seen Elvis, and I was blown away by him, of course, as everybody was, and then a few days later, I get a phone call from our agent, Shane Salerno, saying, I got Austin Butler for Danny Ryan. What? Are you kidding me? And we're going to call him right now. And so moments later, I'm on the phone with Austin, and he obviously very, very smart, understands the character, gets the character totally, is excited about doing it. And we had great conversations, and he's such a good guy, which helps. That's always nice, when you get to work with good people. So yeah, I'm really excited about it. They're intending to make 3 films, starting with City on Fire and then coming here to City of Dreams. And I couldn't be more excited that Austin freaking Butler is playing Danny.
It was the type of casting where you heard that he got cast and you instantly go, of course.
Yeah.
Oh God, that's perfect. Like they couldn't do any better than that. I can't wait to see what he does with it. I think it's going to be incredible. And he comes off as a person, like you say, he just is likable, and there's a quality to him that is very transferable to Danny. Danny has that quality where you're like, still waters run deep. There is a lot more here, than you're seeing on the surface. And I think he is the perfect actor to portray that.
I do too. He's very genuine. You get that feel from him, which is a really good feeling. So again, I'm very excited about it.
That's wonderful. So when you're writing and fleshing out a character as dynamic as Danny, and a world as rich and enormous as the world of this trilogy, where do you start? Do you start with Danny and build out, or do you start out with this universe and work in to Danny?
No, I started inside Danny's head. It's funny, TJ, that I wrote the first sentence of City on Fire 28 years ago. It hasn't changed. This story always started for me with this guy laying on a beach and seeing this woman come out of the water. And so, listen, I know Danny. Do you know what I mean? I grew up with Danny. I played hockey with Danny. I went to bars and surfed and went to the beach with Danny. So I've known this cat my whole life. It was then a matter of taking what was inside him and following these stories from the Aeneid. But what I really wanted was a soulful guy. Do you know what I mean? This guy has one foot in the mob and one foot out of it, which is, as you know, very useful for a writer, because you get to write from the inside, but you also have a guy who can comment on what he's seeing, because he's just a little bit outside of it. So what I mostly wanted from Danny was this soulful feeling. I think Danny's basically a good guy who doesn't always do good things, who makes a lot of mistakes, but then is aware of them, and then it was a matter of building that world around him. Who are his friends? Who's his wife? What's she like? What's his relation to his best friend Patrick? And so building out, and out. Yeah.
It's so interesting that you say that, because writing a good story is conflict, right? In every scene, where's the conflict? Where's the conflict? Where's the conflict? That's just, as a writer, that should be your mantra, especially in this genre, that should be your mantra with every scene.
No
that you write.
conflict, no story, right?
Exactly. And you've crafted a protagonist whose entire existence is a never ending position of conflict.
Right.
And I think that's why Danny reads so well, and why it will translate so well to the screen also, is because his entire existence is never without conflict.
Yeah. And it's funny because what he wants out of life are just sort of normal things.
Yeah.
He wants a wife, he wants a kid, he wants a place to live. He has sort of modest goals and modest aspirations. And yet to get there, so much conflict. He has to fight everybody and everything, for these things that we think of as being very simple givens in our lives are not for Danny, but that was fascinating to write,
And it's fascinating to read too. And it's weird as you're reading it too, like you said, he lives in a world that I hope most of us can't relate to. But the battles that he deals with, you can. Like you said, these are very, very translatable issues that we all deal with every day. And I think that also is why this character in this whole world is just so effective.
That's what we do, isn't it? I mean, I think our job, if I may speak for you for a second and be presumptuous, is to bring the reader into a world that he or she otherwise couldn't enter, and to show it through the character's eyes, which you did so beautifully in Falling and in Drowning. That's what we do every day, and so to try to let people see, what is this guy's life like from inside his head.
It's a fascinating, fun look. I've always taken a tremendous amount of inspiration from your writing, and it has informed my writing in many ways, particularly in the way that your writing has a lyrical quality to it. I hear your writing as I'm reading it in a way that I don't often hear other works. You have this big paragraph full of juicy, beautiful sentences and long descriptions, and it's this beautiful full paragraph. Then it goes into short single sentence paragraph, single sentence paragraph, single sentence paragraph. It's lyrical, it's a song. I hear it, it's very musical. And I heard you say in interviews before that you're a massive fan of jazz.
Mm-hmm.
Has jazz music, and in particular jazz, has that affected your writing?
Totally. In a number of ways. I mean, look, jazz is the soundtrack of noir fiction. And if you watch almost any noir movie, what you're going to hear in the background is jazz. Quite famously in a French film, Elevator to the Gallows, which Miles Davis played the entire score for. But more particularly, there's a saying that I never understood, TJ, until I really was listening to jazz. And it said that the ending of a novel should be simultaneously surprising and inevitable. I thought, well, what? Those are contradictory values. Those are opposites. How's that? And then one day I'm listening to the late, great Sonny Stitt, the great alto saxophone player, playing a tune called Everything Happens to Me, fairly jazz standard. And as the song was starting to end, it's about a 7-minute tune, I realized what was happening. I knew that he was going to have to end that song on a certain chord, or it would be unsatisfying. inevitable. But the notes that he used to get to that ending were surprising. And I went, eureka. Now I've got it. Now I understand. And so now I understand that, if you will, and this sounds very pretentious, I can play lyrically in those paragraphs, right? But then I can hit those 2 or 3 just few surprising notes maybe, and leave a lot of silence around them, as did the late Ahmad Jamal, who died 2 days ago, the piano player who specialized in silences between the notes, and Miles who learned from him. And so that opened it up for me. Do you know what I mean? That yeah, I can play all kinds of notes. I know the basic chords, and I know that the story has to end on one of those chords.
Fascinating. Do you listen to music while you write?
Yeah, typically. Listen, a lot of time I'm very specific about it. When I was writing the drug books, I listened to a lot of narco corrisons. I listened to a lot of those bands, that played that music, so I could inhabit that world. I did a book a while ago called The Force, about the NYPD, and believe it or not, I listened to a lot of hip hop. My son had to educate me, send me a playlist, on what to do, but it was very useful. For these books, it was mostly jazz. Not that Danny is a particularly jazz guy, he's not. But again, I wanted to remind myself of that structure and that feel, and what's doable with narrative prose in terms of the musicality of it, if you will.
Fascinating. Do you play instruments?
Oh gosh. I play a very bad saxophone alone in a soundproof room.
A fan, not so much a participant. I get it.
No, I do play, but not well. Not well.
Oh, that's great. That's great. I'm going to switch over now to some of the questions that we got from our audience who has joined us. They submitted questions prior to this, and they're all great. Lots of questions about Austin Butler. So if you just want to also just chime in anything about that, just feel free to throw anything in there, because obviously people are interested. But a couple of fun ones that I thought would be interesting from Marcia. She asked, and I want to know the answer to this as a person who's, written over 25 novels like you, and I've only written 2, and I'm sort of like, help. What do you do if you have writer's block?
Yeah, I don't believe in it. It's not a real thing.
Okay.
It's not like you can walk outside and you catch it, or you're in an airport and someone sneezes and you catch writer's block. That's not how it works. What I think that writer's block is an attempt to write perfectly on the first draft. And that's not possible. And so what I think happens is we start typing and it's not going the way we want it to, and we lock up and we freeze. Okay. Because we're trying to write perfectly in the moment, and you can't. It's a cliche. Good writing is rewriting. I think the way to break the logjam is to write anything, even copy something. There have been times when I've started to feel paralyzed that I'll just open a book I like and start retyping it. Right? Because you physically, mentally need to break the logjam. Write a jelly label, anything, but write, just keep the mind moving, keep the body moving, keep the hands moving, and you'll write your way out of it. But really, you can't be afraid of the first draft being bad, because guess what? Probably is going to be bad. The nice thing is we're not like surgeons with a kid on the operating table. We get to make mistakes, right? They're very, very fixable. You get to come back the next day and redo it. So that's my thought on writer's block.
Well, there might be a kid on the operating table, but the good news is you can just delete, and suddenly the kid's back alive again. Surgery was a success. So
yeah, it's a great life, because everybody says what you want them to say. And if they don't, you delete them.
And you delete people quite a bit,
Yeah,
which is a good
I have a
segue to
body
your
count.
next,
Yeah,
to
yeah,
your, high body count,
yeah.
in your books, which leads me to the next question, which made me think of a conversation that I had with Steve Hamilton, a friend of ours,
Sure.
another
Great guy. Yeah.
incredible, great
Great
guy,
writer.
another incredible crime writer.
Yep.
When my first book was coming out, we were having a conversation and he was talking about crime writers in the crime writing community. And he's like, it's the weirdest thing in the world. Sick puppies. We come up with books where high body counts, the most atrocious, awful, horrible things you could possibly imagine. And then you meet these authors in real life, and they're the loveliest people.
Mhm.
They're the loveliest, sweetest people. And I'm sure everybody listening to this conversation is listening to you, and you're talking about jazz music and all of the soft, beautiful things. And then they read the book and it's like, wait, that guy
That guy, yeah.
wrote this? Like, woo, again, talk about still waters run deep. So the question from Bridget is, what do you love most about the world of mystery and suspense and darkness? Because it's such a juxtaposition to John Winslow, the
Yeah,
man.
yeah, who lives a very, very normal, kind of boring life, really, Flaubert, and I'm paraphrasing Flaubert, the great French novelist, said, I live a life of regularity so that I can commit chaos on the page. You're saving it, right, for the page. Yeah, Bridget, the great Bruce Springsteen, who I think is the greatest American poet since Walt Whitman, wrote a song called Darkness on the Edge of Town. And the ending lyric, he says, tonight I'll be on that hill because I can't stop. I'll be on that hill with everything I've got, where life's on the line and dreams are found and lost. I'll be there on time when I'll pay the cost for wanting things that can only be found in the darkness on the edge of town. I love the darkness on the edge of town. I love driving in the darkness of the edge of town. I like walking in the darkness on the edge of town. I like writing in the darkness on the edge of town because, to me, not for everybody, but to me, that's where the great stories are. That's where people are struggling. That's where it's man against the machine. That's where people like the Danny Ryans of the world are living and trying to find a good life, trying to find a way. And I think this is the central question of crime fiction, trying to find a way to live decently in an indecent world. That's the darkness on the edge of town. It's been appealing to me since I was a kid. I always wanted to go to those parts of town. And it's appealing to me now because, to me, that's where life is at its most vivid, where life's on the line and dreams are found and lost.
Ooh, what a great answer. Don, are you a writer? Because it sure sounds like it when you give an answer like that. Something tells me, good grief, that was an answer. Whew. Thank you for that question, Bridget, and thank you for that answer, Don. Which the next question from Jessica makes me want to know what you're going to say to this, which is not really about the book, but we're here to talk to you and we want to hear what you have to say. Jessica wants to know, what is the best advice you have ever received?
Never waste 10 minutes. A professor of mine, is still a dear friend, once said, Winslow, never waste 10 minutes. I said, what do you mean? And he said, you're about to go out, maybe with your wife, or you've got an appointment and you've got 10 minutes to kill. He said, the temptation is to put the TV on or just sit back or do something stupid. He said, instead, go rewrite a sentence. You'd be shocked at how much you can get done in 10 minutes. So sometimes if I have that 10 minutes, waiting for my wife to get ready, which, is typically more than 10 minutes, I'll go back and I'll look at a paragraph. I'll look at the verbs on a page. And almost every time, TJ, I can make an improvement. or I might come up with a whole new sentence that was better than what I had. That's really the best piece of advice I've ever received.
So simple and so good. And those 10 minutes add up, right? 10 minutes
They,
here, 10 minutes there.
they absolutely do. It's what I tell aspiring writers, who say, I'm going to write my book this year. And I say, you're probably not, if that's the way you frame it in your head. Because what's going to happen is you're going to be busy with your job, your kids, your family, other obligations, and you're not going to get a bunch of pages written for a few weeks, and you're going to get down on yourself and you're going to quit. So instead of saying, I'm going to write a book this year, say, I'm going to write a page on Tuesday. Do the doable, but do it. And if you think about it, it comes off of your 10-minute comment. If you write a page a day for a year, you're pretty close to having a book at the end of that year. Do the doable.
It's fantastic advice. It's sort of the idea of, our life is made up of not what we do every once in a while, but what we do consistently.
Yeah, every day.
And so, yeah, you might be able to every once in a while sit down for 8 uninterrupted hours and,
Right.
and really have a burst of inspiration, but
Yeah.
you're not going to have that probably every day, or at least
No.
most people aren't. So the easier way to get there is to start with that 10-minute increment and just keep doing that consistently.
Consistently. Yeah. Do the doable, but do it. When I was trying to do this thing, well, listen, I think, TJ, I was 6 or 7 published books into my career before I could quit my day jobs plural. So like most people, I didn't have those 8 hours, to sit quietly in a room with the sunlight coming in at a 45-degree angle and a number 2 pencil at my left hand and everything we think we need, which we don't, by the way. All we need is a writing instrument. That's all we need. And so I said 5 pages a day, which I learned from Joseph Wambaugh, who emailed me this morning to congratulate me on publication day, the community of crime writers. Major hero of mine, and waking up to that this morning, was fantastic. But I learned that from Joe. He did 10 pages a day when he was a murder cop, and I couldn't do that, but I could do 5 pages a day.
Was it a transition when you went from 10 minutes every once in a while while working, multiple survival jobs while raising a family to suddenly being, okay, I can do this now. I have the privilege of being able to do this full time, and I have my calendar is wide open. What was that transition like?
You use the exact correct word, privilege. I've always felt it was a privilege, and I'm very grateful to it. And like most privileges, I needed to treat it with respect. And so I would start work at 5:30 in the morning and work till 5:30 in the evening as if it were a factory job. The whistle blew and I'm at my desk, and I did consider it a privilege, because now I'm not, chasing leopards around Africa with a camera or, doing whatever. And so, it was at first strange. But then, like most things, you develop routines, you develop habits, and that was my habit. It's just treat it with respect, treat it like a job that you love and you've always wanted, but a job that you're very grateful to have.
And I think that's I know for me has been as a new author, that has been incredibly instructive and incredibly helpful to frame it like that of it is work. I think we have such an idealized, romanticized idea of what it is to sit down and write. But at the end of the day, like, who is it that has that great quote, that the muse will find you, but she has to find you working? Like, you have
That's a great quote. I haven't heard that, but that's exactly it.
I forget who said it, but somebody brilliant said it. And that's exactly right. Even when you don't know what it is you're gonna write, sit down and it'll come. And you are.
I get impatient sometimes with us writers when we think we're the only people who struggle. Like, everybody has bad days on their job, and we moan about rejection. Everybody has been rejected at one time or another. Everybody, does not get a job maybe that they wanted, or a promotion or whatever, but we romanticize it. and we save rejection letters like noxious weeds in our garden, when we should just throw them over our shoulders and keep working.
Or also let them pile up as a source of inspiration and remind ourselves every day that hard things are hard. And this is
Yeah.
a privilege to do this, and you got to work for it.
Yeah, absolutely.
You've been a profound inspiration, I know, for myself and for so many, for that work ethic. I've heard you describe writing as an addiction.
Yeah.
And I know that in between books, you take like a handful of days off and that's it. You're right back there. You're writing. I hate to disappoint anybody listening to this that doesn't already know this news, but after this trilogy, you are retiring. This is your final works that you're putting out, which is a major bummer for all of us. But congratulations to you for that. So my question is, as a man who sees writing as an addiction, are you retiring from writing or publishing your writing?
Interesting question. Publishing my writing for sure. I'm not retiring from writing because, I've been kind of fairly active over the past few years in terms of writing shorter things, political comments, and with Shane Salerno doing some of these videos. So continue to do that. But yeah, listen, I think for this trilogy, by the way, is finished. It's done. It's in the can. And so now I wake up in the morning, always as usual, thinking I want to do 10 pages and then realizing I'd not, and that's an odd feeling. And yes, there's withdrawal that goes along with that. A little quivering and shaking from time to time. But no, I've made this decision and I'll stick to it. And I'll maybe I have to go to writer rehab or something. I don't know. Or you call someone up and you say, I'm thinking of writing a novel, and they go, no, don't do it. And you go, okay, just a short story. No, how about a joke? I don't know, but I think I'll get through it.
I think I asked just for all of us who who are bummed that you're retiring. I think it's like even just the possibility that there's unread Don Winslow stories that are still being written that maybe someday we'll be able to see it. I'm throwing a bone to everybody who's just kind of like, no, don't go. But
thank you very much. Yeah, it's a little mystery around that. But yeah, the addiction thing, I finished a book called The Cartel in the morning, had lunch, and then started a new book in the afternoon. Because why waste an afternoon,
Why waste 10 minutes?
Why waste 10 minutes?
That is incredible. All right, I got one last question for you here because we're getting a little close on time. This one's coming.
Oh, wow, went by fast.
I know, right? I just looked at the clock and was like, whoa, we're already, well, maybe two questions. I don't know. But this one, we'll bring it back to the book. Who is your favorite character that you created in your book and why? And if you want to add on to that and say, like, who is your favorite character of your entire,
Yeah, that's kind of like asking, which of your kids do you like the most? I mean, I only have one myself, so that's, an easy answer. But I don't know, in this book, this trilogy, obviously I'm very fond of Danny. There are two women characters that I kind of really like a lot. Madeline, Danny's mother, who surprised me by becoming a major character, and a young woman named Cassandra, that I became fond of, sadly, I think. Of all time, you always do have a fondness for your first, kind of whiny guy named Neil Carey was in my first 5 books. But there are a lot of characters, there's a guy named Pablo Mora in a book called The Cartel, a journalist that I thought was going to be a very minor character who turned into a major character. So, you never know. But what I would say, though, is that to write well, you have to fall in love with all of them. When you're writing, you always need to be dancing with the woman you came with. And so, yeah, it depends on the day.
That's so great. And also to the type I've heard it said before, that you can't judge your characters,
Right.
especially for the worlds that you write in, the worlds that you create. These are people that in real life we might judge and make some judgments
Exactly.
about. How do you navigate that? How do you navigate that neutrality towards characters who do genuinely terrible things?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you nailed it already. You can't be objective. That's not my job, to make judgments about characters. My job is to see the world through their eyes, as distasteful as that might be. Everybody has a story. Everybody has a point of view. We might find them legitimately horrific, but everybody has one. I've sat in many prisons when I was an investigator and later as a writer, talking, sitting across the table from murderers, hearing their stories. They always have a point of view. That's my job. It's my job to bring that to the page. So I absolutely, if you stand outside and judge them, all you're going to get is a silhouette. Do you know what I mean? A one-dimensional figure of black on a field of your boring moral purity. And so I have to see the world through their eyes and try to portray that.
It makes me think, listening to you, it makes me think that you essentially as a writer play the role of an impartial juror. Like, you know what I mean? You just
Yeah.
listen to the facts. The burden of proof will be decided at the end of the day, but over the course of understanding the story, over the course of the trial, you were impartial. You were just stating the facts and looking at the whole picture.
Yeah, I think it behooves us, particularly in this genre, to stay out of the story, to remove ourselves from the books. My life's not very interesting, but I think Danny's is, and other people's lives are interesting. And so I think the more we stay out of it, the better. I have no interest at all in self-expression. It's never been my thing. I don't want to express myself. I want to tell good stories with good characters.
That's so fascinating to think that a writer is not a form of self-expression. That's a fascinating sort of, I feel like that's got to be really helpful to anybody listening to who feels like, which I struggle with sometimes, like it's such a personal thing, writing, putting out your thoughts, your feelings, or emotions. But that's a fascinating way to look at it of, it's not self-expression. You're essentially the vessel with which these characters are working through. It has nothing to do with you. If you can remove yourself, if you can do that psychological trick of removing yourself from that equation, I can't help but think that that's why you don't struggle with writer's block, which maybe a lot of other writers do.
Yeah, I don't know. Listen, I think the early drafts are about the writer and the later drafts are about the reader.
Huh.
It's like when I first start to write a book, I'm not thinking about the reader. I'm just enjoying myself because I'm interested in the topic, but when I get to the later drafts, 10 through 14, somewhere in there, as the drafts go on, I'm increasingly only thinking about the reader. How's it going to fall in the reader's ear? How's it going to look to the reader's eye? Does it make sense? Is it paced so the reader will stay with it? That's all I'm thinking about. Early on, I don't care. I'm just wailing away at the keys, just playing the tunes. But later, then, you refine them for the listener.
It's fascinating. And you said at the beginning of that you write about what you're interested in, and you have written about a whole host of scenes and places and characters and worlds. And it has been such a rich, lush landscape of variety that you've given us. I know you're retiring, but if you need your fix, and if you were going to go write something else, is there any unscratched itch? Is there any world, that you haven't explored that you would like to?
Of course, but I'm not going to tell you. I'm not putting that out there. Yes, of course. Listen, the interesting thing about life is it's not that there's too little to do, there's too much to do. I never understand why no one's ever bored. Because it's a big world and there's so much. And so sure, there are other things that I'd like to write about.
Oh,
But there's only so much time.
there's only so much time. Oh, Don, I feel like that's a really good button to go out on, and also to
Okay.
leave on a nice cliffhanger of I'm retiring, but I'm also addicted, and I'm not gonna tell you what my next ideas are. That's that's a writer right there, ladies and gentlemen. Don, this has been truly, truly, truly wonderful to
Oh,
talk
for
with
me, I've
you.
really enjoyed it. And thanks for doing this, Teach. I really appreciate you doing this.
My absolute pleasure. Thank you everyone for joining us here. A couple of housekeeping things just to remind everyone as they are signing off. If you bought a book, a signed copy through Barnes & Noble, they will be shipping out as of today since it's pub day and should be arriving in the next 8 to 10 business days. If as a result of this wonderful conversation, you realize that you need to buy more signed copies to give away as Christmas gifts and Father's Day, which is coming up. By the way, this is a perfect gift for Father's Day. barnesandnoble.com, available 24/7 to get those copies. And if you just need to get one ASAP and don't want to wait for the signed one to come, go to any brick and mortar Barnes & Noble bookstore, and they will have copies for you today to buy. And I have a feeling they'll probably be prominently placed on a front table because everybody is excited and ready to read City of Dreams. Don, this has been incredible. Thank you to Barnes & Noble. Thank you for everyone that joined us. Thank you for this, Don, and congratulations.
Thanks very much. And thank you, everybody, for coming. And thanks to Barnes & Noble. And thank you, Teach.
See y'all later.
Bye-bye.